Hello everyone, welcome to the lore video. This is my third time recording it because of either mistakes that I made in the lore or because I leaked some personal information. That's completely my fault. So I want to start by going over the main island, which we'll be seeing most of the fighting for the beginning. Like, that's more important to us right now. So we can see how they're situated. This is down here where my mouse is. This is where episodes 1, 2, and 3 take place. The first and second battle of Fort Granning, which is what this light gray area is, and then the Tans push and encounter Greens at this rail yard, and this is another rail yard, which will be episode 5. Don't worry, we'll get to that after episode 4, which will be cutting away from the main action and cut to the blues and purples going up against the grays. Now, I kind of want to explain the alliances real quick. This is what the alliances look like right now. Just ignore everything that isn't these two, because those aren't alliances except for these guys. But so this is the current alliance. I believe they are called. Let's look. They're called the Boy, but that's the trade association. Their military alliance. Uh, yeah, these four are a military alliance. These two, excluding the oranges, so we can move the oranges like kind of like behind them, I guess, or next to them. So these two are in a military alliance, and so was orange, but because of the first plastic wars, yes, there is a first one and second one. The second one is what I've been playing out. The first one is just kind of explain the alliances and whatnot. These guys, these two are still in a military alliance, but all three of them are still in a trade alliance, which means that the oranges may be joining or will be joining the tans and grays later down on the series. The reds and the yellows, they are kind of like their own thing right now. I still haven't decided what will happen with them, if they will join on the tan side or the green side or make their own side. Um, these guys are called the microplastic nations, which is a name that my friend suggested to me because these are the plastic nations. And so it's neon green, neon purple, and turquoise. And turquoise kind of is like neon compared to the rest of them. You could technically bunch normal yellow compared to gold and obsidian in there, but yellow is a lot more explainable than turquoise, and it's easier to say too. So these three guys are in an alliance, but they won't matter until later on in the series. Same thing with these two and these two. These two are the rock nations because gold and obsidian. Now, obsidian, for some reason, are just like the founding fathers. Uh, and the light greens are like really low textured. I have no clue what's going on there, but they're wearing World War I French helmets. So, anyways, let's get back to the actual text document. Now I'm done explaining the alliances. Uh, so let's bring up this map again. Red, yellows. Here's the microplastic nations. They're kind of like far away, and then here's the rock nations, much further away. Uh, I still haven't decided any lore pertaining anything outside of this main island of these 5 nations. 6 if you want to count green and light green as 2 different ones, but it's the green nation. So the first war, here I'll highlight what we're talking about right now. The first war, which lasted 7 years, so it's -7 Ya to 0 Ya, which means years after the first plastic wars. I decided to use that as the namesake for the years because it's a lot easier than saying like it took place in 2013 and not having to explain that they have World War I weapons fighting weapons from uh the future or whatever. All right, here. So we're just focusing on this first paragraph. If you're reading anything below that, there's spoilers like past this paragraph. But no, past this paragraph. So we're going to be focusing on the first two paragraphs. And then after that, we'll skip down to geology, then nations. Because the rest of this are spoilers for episodes 4 through 6. I believe. Anyways, so the first Plastic Wars were a series of battles and territorial conquest over the islands of Plastica Major and Plastica Minor, which I will explain later, but it's these two islands right here. So, actually, wait, I could just keep that up here. I'll just move it down. Uh, so how the war pretty much started was that there were Tans on patrol near the blue border, and they started shooting at each other because both of them thought they were blue, so it was like friendly fire. So, just some people being dumb started an entire war that killed a whole ton of people. They believed it was from blue-funded mercenaries, so basically being shot at by blues, because they found blue weaponry near the side of the battle. Uh, but it's the blue border, so I mean, I guess would, you know, they would have weapons like accidentally left there occasionally, but they still don't know exactly how the equipment got there. Maybe someone planted it. Ooh, foreshadowing, maybe. I don't know. But then the Tans decided to attack the Blues, try to take them by surprise. But the Blues called in the Greens to counterattack the Tans, and the Tans called in the Grays, and then the Oranges joined the Tans and the Grays because they saw that they could potentially get some land, which is the complete opposite of what happened to them. They ended up losing like a fourth or a third of their land. And the Purples were like, well, we're the only neutral nation, so it's either pick a side or die. So they decided to join the Greens and the Blues. So they joined up, and after a while, the Grays, after 7 years of fighting, the Grays were like, let's stop fighting. The Tans and the Oranges agreed, and the Grays had to cede some land to the Purples, which is everything above this third line from the top. So just draw an imaginary line for your mind. And the Oranges had to give away all of these military bases, and they had to give some to the Blues and the Greens, but then the Tans were permitted to have a military base to kind of like counteract the Blues and Greens ones. So the Orange people, they were kind of like, that really sucks. And over the 15 years until the Second War, they kind of been growing a sentiment that they want their land back. They want to kick out these foreigners, but the Tans, they're gonna ally up with the Tans, is what I'm trying to say. They want to kick out the Greens and the Blues, and the Tans will give back their land voluntarily. Oh, there's a dog barking. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Probably not. But so the Oranges are pretty pissed. So yeah, now we're reading this second paragraph right here. Oh, yeah, let's just leave it that size. So the Tans, they were pretty mad, and they began rapid militarization. And after they built up their second army, because the first one, peace treaties and whatnot, they gathered pretty much near everyone's borders, and they first started invading Fort Granning and also striking along other areas. But the main battle is Fort Granning, and due to poor communication, no one really knew that the Tans were in there until after fighting at this rail yard, but that will come later in the story. So this is kind of like a recap with some minor details changed because I used the same battles that I have here to make the story here, and I decided to reenact those battles and then post them to YouTube. And then after episode 6, episode 7 and beyond, they're going to be based off of how the AI fight and how they handle everything on their own. I'm only going to help them out if they have to re-man weaponry, or they're being really dumb, or some people are stuck, and maybe some other stuff, but that will be for future me. So, the Tans. So this is episode 1 and 2 right here. The Tans also began attacking along the green and blue borders, and the Greys started volunteering to assist the Tans and the Jesus. Let me bring this back up. It kind of helps me like prevent myself from like having an aneurysm from all this other text. All right, let's like zoom out over here. So yeah, so the Greys were pretty much like, let's get back to it. Let's get back to war. And the Purples were like, you know what? I kind of don't want to be invaded. So then they joined the Greens and the Blues again. And the Blues and the Purples pretty much know what's going on. The Greens are still kind of like, huh? At least for this specific area of battle, they might know like further along the border that there's stuff going on. So the Purples, oh no, sorry. The Tans also begun attacks along further green and blue border stations. The Greys also began volunteer programs and military aids to assist the Tans in these battles, with the Purples doing doing likewise. Oh, with the Purples doing likewise with the Green Alliance members. So right now, Purple isn't really like, let's go to war. They're just doing the same thing that the Greys are. They're just supporting them by sending them equipment, men, and intel. But after the second battle of Fort Granning, the Tans broke through, which we saw, and then uh 7 Tan soldiers, mainly cowards, who hid until the battle majority of the gunfire was over. That was referring to when I originally made that story, but as we saw, it changed. It was actually double the amount of people, and most of them were actually people who were actively participating in the battle. Anyways, uh, they they kind of like held the fort, and then they radioed back that the fort had fallen. So the Tans started gathering and pushed further into Green territory, attacking this rail yard, which we saw in episode 3. And they had no vehicle support, which I explained because they can't really get vehicles through there. And they did have those tanks, but they attacked the same day, so you can't just repair a tank in one day, you know. Uh, but it was a sizable attack. But the they didn't really suffer crippling casualties in our battle, but they suffered enough casualties to slow them down, but not completely attack them. So from now, these Control Z. Dude, what the hell is going on? Okay. So these 2 paragraphs are stuff that I have not recorded yet. These are episodes 4 through 6. Now let's move down to here. Geology, which I don't know if it's the right term, but it's a term. 14 minutes. Jesus, I'm doing really bad compared to my first 2 recordings. So the plastic nations reside upon a series of islands, obviously. There are 10 islands. Here, we could show that. There's 10 islands, you can count them. But only the big ones, not the small ones like these. So Plastica Major and Plastica Minor, with being these 2 major islands. So homes to the greens, tans, grays, purples, and blues. That's Plastica Major. And the Plastica Minor is the orange island. And these islands have been in constant warfare, and with their like peace like lasting very little. So before the first plastic war. I guess they were like having a lot of wars and battles and whatnot. But the major ones are the first plastic wars and the second one. The first plastic wars, peace between that and the second one only lasted 15 years. So, yeah. To the west of them is the island of Kirsch. I don't remember if that's how you pronounce it, but that's Cherry in German, which is home to the Reds. And south of that is the island of Sol, which is right there, which is the home island of the Yellows, which means sun in Spanish. And there's also the island of Rosa, which I believe is pink in German as well. It's this island. Uh, so further west are these three islands called microplastica. Each island is named after the ship, which is neon purple, shoe, which is this one that kind of looks like a shoe, and griffin. It's kind of up the interpretation, but this kind of looks like a griffin, um, or like uh, the dragon that they have on the flag of Wales. Anyways, these islands are kind of like, what the hell? So the residents of these islands are outcasts from Plastica, those with defects deemed too great to be fixed, or simply criminals who have been repainted. So, uh, most of the people here are people who have been. Oh, sorry. I accidentally switched to a thumbnail for episode 1. Here's the thumbnail for episode 2. It's kind of bad, but it's the thumbnail. Anyways, the people here, they're outcasts from the main islands. Uh, and then to the west are the Ore Islands, which I believe I've been calling them the Rock Nations. I can't remember. But these are the Ore Islands, Obsidian and Gold. Uh, Now they're called Ob and Go, respectively. Like it's the first two letters of each nation, whatever. The people who live there are different from the plastic people, sporting different uniforms, which we saw. They have like fancy hats and dress like George Washington. Uh, and rather than being made of plastic, they're made of malleable rock. So I know obsidian's kind of like shatterable, but for the sake of like ease, we're gonna have uh gold and obsidian kind of like they're made of the same stuff. So it's a little bit harder to make them to like help them medically, also leaving many disfigured because you can't really exactly make shape them as easy as plastic people. So they so I'm sorry. It's like this giant block of text. I know it's really bad for you guys, so it's pretty bad for me as well. So they can't be given like the same medical help as they can in the as plastic people in the field, but they're tougher because they're made of rock, which means they can survive a little bit more. Now, for some reason, I wrote like a whole racism subplot for the Greens. I don't know what I was smoking when I wrote that, but there's a racism subplot. Um, so these are the two nations that I've written out right now, Green and Tan. The Green nations were two separate nations who decided to join together because they were pretty similar. But after a while, they started hating each other. Well, not hating each other, but some of them didn't like others. Pretty much like it's pretty much just racism. This is like yeah. So we can just ignore that because okay, the light greens had political control. Light greens had control the majority of the joint green council and had say what happened in green. So the darker greens, they were pretty mad at the imbalance of power. and they started doing like a bunch of like protesting and boycotts and whatnot. So like I said, racism subplot for some reason. But once the first Plastic Wars happened, they realized that why are we fighting? We have to deal with this for being attacked. So their old biases still kind of linger and could cause a large divide if the nation is at turmoil for too long. That's foreshadowing, potentially. So, they have older firearms because their modern factories were bombed by tan bombers in the first Plastic Wars and are currently unable to get new factories due to internal instability, which is, that racism subplot that I was talking about. They're more neutral, which kind of estranged them from the rest of the allies and made them a weaker target. They have an army of 1.7 million, mainly volunteers, but many inexperienced recruits. So they have very few veterans from the first Plastic Wars, most of them being retired, killed, or officers or generals now. So simply advanced in rank. The Green Nation is a military alliance with Bluteria, which is the Blue Nation, and a trade association with Blue, Orange, and Yellow. Okay, I made a minor error. I had the oranges on both sides, so I also wanted the yellows and reds to kind of be their own thing for now and not be currently involved. So, the Green Nation is a military alliance with Blue Terria, which is the Blue Nation, and a trade association with the Blue and Purple Nations, BP, and then you could put there in parentheses G as well, but BP because it sounds a lot better than BPG. And that's pretty much it for the greens. I am 22 minutes into this. Sorry, I'm rambling a lot. The Tan Nation started out as a minor power, but okay, these are just bios. So they're a minor power. They were a minor power, but through years of rapid militarization and industrialization, and under the brutal dictatorship of, I made that name up, but it's Theo Patterson. They kind of like became a major nation, and exterminating like smaller nations as they grew. So either like smaller tan communities or green, blue, gray, etc., etc. And after the first plastic wars, everyone in all Plastica, so all around the globe, they were just being watched because no one really trusted them anymore except for their own allies. But even then, they kind of lost. Uh, the Tans, or like at least the Tan political government, they were greedy and willing to do anything to gain an inch of land or a cent of money. Uh, they're planning to do something, an offensive into green territory and blue lands. So this pretty much sets up what they're gonna do, what they did in episode 1, and probably some other episode. They have a bunch of older stuff left over from the first Plastic Wars, but they have modern weaponry as well, though not in a quantity to, completely equip every soldier and be regularly brought into battle. Uh, they have a pretty strong army. Many who are just like required to serve. They're pretty warrior about their whole thing. They kind of like want to serve as well, but they have a good amount of volunteers. Many officers and soldiers are experienced, so not like the inexperienced Greens, due to training or veterancy from the first Plastic Wars, and even some skirmishes from the early days of the Tan Nation, which go way back further than -7 yaw, which I came up with. I don't know if I explained this earlier, but just for ease, it's better than saying 2013 and then you would have to explain why there's weapons from the 40s. Now these are like ideas that I don't really have like formalized. So the Ore Nations are rich and kind of do their own thing. The Gold Nation also rents out mercenaries. That's a pretty good idea that me and my friend came up with. And my friend came up with a finale idea of where after a bunch of wars happen in the second. Oh, wait, spoiler warning, because I can't confirm or deny if these ideas will be used, specifically the finale. Uh, Honestly, this will probably be completely different than the actual finale, but this was just an idea that I had, me and my friend had, where the microplastics, they were kind of mad, so they invaded Plastica Major and Minor, and they also attacked the Ore Nations so they can get some stuff, but the Ore Nations joined the regular plastic people to attack. The Coalition of Plastics is what they're called, if you don't count the Ore Nations, but it's whatever. Uh, Coalition of ores and plastic. Oh, wait, actually, wait, that's a much better idea. Ores and plastics. There we go. Possible moral argument. I don't know what I was smoking when I wrote this whole racism subplot. I'm just gonna delete that. But this finale was just an idea that I have. It's in no way, shape, or form representative of what will happen in the actual finale, which I have not have planned out. I have been recording for way too long. It's been 26 minutes. Thank you for watching. See you in episode 4.